Today with Ash Wednesday, we begin the season of Lent. It's time of renewal and return to the Lord. And as I was praying about where God might be leading both myself and our family of parishes during this season, it came to my heart and mind that during this year of St. Joseph, that we ought to turn to St. Joseph for his assistance this Lent. We'll even celebrate his major feast day, Feast of St. Joseph, the Spouse of Mary, almost exactly a month from today. It's actually March 19th. In today's gospel, we hear Jesus explain the three classic practices that will make the season of Lent fruitful: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And so we can reflect on each of these three, especially in light of St. Joseph. So we start with fasting. Today, Ash Wednesday, is a day of fasting, as well as Fridays during Lent, days of abstinence from eating meat. And we fast from eating food as a way of expressing that we cannot live on just food alone, but that we also are in great need of God. Fasting from something like food can help us to become more disciplined, to be able to fast from what's even more important, to fast from sin. To let God remove sins that maybe we've been in the habit of being a part of our life. So fasting is not just about food. And also, if there's other things that we maybe have become attached to, then it can be a good time to also fast from some of these things. For example, we can get so easily attached to things like our phone. So it can be good to fast from using them as much as we would usually. A couple weeks ago, when I was here for Sunday Mass, I reflected that it may be good to fast from some of those things like the media that can fill us with so much anxiety, to turn off the TV and the news, to put down the phones and the social media, to fast from filling ourselves with so many things that just sadden our soul. So what does St. Joseph teach us about fasting? Well, when people were questioning whether Jesus actually came from God, they said things like, isn't that Jesus? He's just the son of Joseph. To them, Joseph was just a regular guy, a simple carpenter, so Jesus couldn't be much special either. Joseph was kind of hidden in the background. Even in the Bible, Joseph doesn't express a single word aloud. And so in the gospel today, when Jesus says that when we fast or pray or do good works, that we shouldn't try to make a big show of it, but rather kind of stay hidden in the background. Unfortunately, making a big show of things is sometimes what people can get caught up in doing today. Let's post pictures of all the good things that we're doing so everybody can see how good we are. But Joseph teaches us that that's not how we should do it. So many of the good things that he did were completely hidden. And so should many of the good things that we do. St. Joseph's holiness was wrapped up in a kind of simplicity. And that's what fasting from certain things can help us to do as well. Help us to be simple. Instead of wanting recognition or more and more things, fasting helps us appreciate all that God has already given us. Especially what's the most important things, like family. So St. Joseph, please help us to fast from those things that are keeping us from being simple followers of Jesus. Second is almsgiving. And almsgiving is about doing good works as well as assisting the poor. St. Joseph is a saint who knows well how to roll up his sleeves and get to work, both as his job as the carpenter and in the many ways that he cared for and protected Mary and Jesus. Joseph is the patron saint of workers, and we celebrate later in the year a second of his feast days, St. Joseph the Worker, on May 1st. So during Lent, we should think about what are those kinds of good works, almsgiving, that God is asking of each of us. And before we think about adding extra practices on top, we should think first about what is the normal things that I'm supposed to be doing each day, the daily work that we're called to do, to reflect upon how well do I do them. Am I putting in my full effort? Do I do them with a joy and peace, or is there lots of complaint? Because God can draw us to himself, especially through just the ordinary tasks that we do each day. Another aspect of good works, of almsgiving, includes doing the corporal and the spiritual works of mercy. And our world today could especially use each of us living out, especially some of these spiritual works. So, for example, one is to bear wrongs patiently. Something that we're, I think, lacking in our society today. So when somebody does something that hurts or says something that wrongs you, to not lash back out at them, but instead to be patient with them. Or a second one is to forgive offenses willingly. And when someone wrongs us, to let go of our anger, not to hold on to a grudge or to try to get back, but forgive them. We need a lot more of these kinds of good works in today's world. St. Joseph, help us to do well the good works that will lead us and our families to holiness. And finally, the practice of prayer. As important as it is to work, it's also important to rest and to pray. Prayer is just talking to God and then listening to him talk to you. And we know that this was true for St. Joseph, that he prayed and he talked to God. And we know, too, that God responded speaking back to Joseph. God especially spoke to Joseph while he was resting, even while he was sleeping. He heard God's voice. Now, for some of us, it may be a good Lenten practice that we ought to be getting some more sleep so that we actually have refreshed bodies. But all of us will certainly also need to have refreshed souls, and that comes through prayer. It's a great practice, especially to pray, related to those two kinds of rest. To pray before we go to bed, and to pray in the morning when we get up. Psalm 127 kind of brings this idea of rest and prayer together. Prayer that's especially needed in order for the work of our life to be fruitful. The Psalm says, "If the Lord does not build the house, in vain do the builders labor. If the Lord does not watch over the city, in vain does the watchman keep vigil. In vain is your earlier rising, your going later to rest. You who toil for the bread you eat, when he pours gifts on his beloved while they slumber." This psalm really expresses what it was like for St. Joseph. He toils through the day, but then God's blessings come to him while he rests in prayer and even while he sleeps. So God can pour out his gifts upon us while we're resting in prayer, in his presence. So all that we do each day, including these Lenten practices of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, all of this will be without worth unless God is the one who is doing it within our soul. Joseph didn't make himself holy. God did. We will not make ourselves holy. God will. There's a favorite line of mine that comes from the prophet Isaiah, sometimes prayed during daytime prayer. "By waiting and by calm you will be saved. In quiet and in trust shall be your strength." St. Joseph, help us to take time to pray and to rest in God's presence. So this Lent, let's follow the example of St. Joseph in his simplicity, his work, his prayer. St. Joseph, pray for us.